Greetings, YPA families. This is Miss Kick, your middle school principal. As you well know, the middle school years are some of the most challenging years of anyone's life. And a hot topic for middle schools today is bullying. We get bullying reports regularly from both students and families, but in most situations, the issue turns out not actually to be bullying. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to talk about bullying in schools, what it is, what it isn't, and what to do about it. First, let's start with some national statistics. Roughly 20% of students surveyed reported feeling bullied, and a slightly higher number of female than of male students reported feeling bullied. But an important stat is that less than half of the students who felt bullied have actually notified an adult at school. So let's talk a little bit first about what bullying is. Here's a good strong definition. Bullying is when an individual or group targets a particular person repeatedly, meaning more than once over more than one day, with the intention to make that person feel hurt, afraid, or embarrassed. So let's break that down. Bullying has to be intentional and targeted. So in the targeted scenario, one person or a group of individuals are constantly seeking out one particular student. It's not random, it's not who just happens to show up. It's a particular student that's being targeted. It's also intentional. This person or group is intending to make that person feel hurt, afraid, or embarrassed. It's also repeated. So it's not a behavior that happens once or every once in a while. It's something that happens more than once over more than one day. Lastly, it's also one direction. I'll tell you, I've been at YPA for over a decade, and I would say that I've probably dealt with one or two legitimate bullying situations each year. In all other situations, it's typically something different. So let's talk about what it might be. So what do we see most often? Well, that's negative relationships, exclusion, dislike or disagreement, and poor social skills or rudeness. So let's talk about each of these in more depth. In a negative relationship, we often see that students are treating each other poorly. It's not one person targeting another person, but two students who just do not interact well. Another way to think about this is frenemies. In middle school, relationships change quite regularly, and we will often have students who are friends one day and not friends the next. And then on the days that they consider each other enemies, they tend not to treat each other so well. We often see these negative relationships also start out as joking. A group of kids may be joking with each other, and everyone starts off okay with what's being said or done, but then someone starts to get their feelings hurt as the joking continues. So if we look at what bullying requires, let's see why this doesn't fit. In a negative relationship, it may or may not be targeted or intentional, especially if the students think that they're joking. It may or may not be repeated. It typically isn't a negative relationship, but it is definitely not one direction in these situations. Both students are equally engaged and treating each other in a bad manner. Another common situation is exclusion, dislike, or disagreement. As I mentioned earlier, relationships and social groups change all the time in middle school. And as these relationships change, we may find that a student who was joining in with the group one day is potentially left out of the group the next day. Additionally, students are regularly shifting their interests and ideas, which can lead to disagreement. And lastly, we of course encourage students to treat each other nicely, but we also understand that everybody isn't going to like everybody else. It's perfectly normal for students to want to hang out with their friends, and on the flip side, not hang out with people that they don't consider their friend. So let's consider the bullying checklist. A person's feelings might be hurt in these situations, but that's not necessarily the intention of the group. It may or may not be repeated depending on the situation, and it may or may not be one direction. But again, the most important thing here is that in these situations, being hurtful or mean isn't the intention. Another common situation is poor social skills or rudeness. Middle schoolers often struggle with social interaction. They don't always know how to make friends, and they definitely don't handle issues appropriately. So sometimes we see someone making a mean comment, but it's not intended to be mean. It's just that person didn't know how to handle the situation appropriately. So let's look at the bullying checklist. It's not targeted, and it's not intentional. This is simply situations where students don't know how to handle appropriately social interactions, but they're not intending to be mean or hurtful. Similarly, with the last situation, it may or may not be repeated, and it may or may not be one direction. But again, it's not targeted or intentional. So what can we do about it? We have a couple of strategies that we use here at school. One of them is mediation. We use this most often when we see the negative relationships or when we see students who aren't handling situations very well. This gives us the opportunity to sit students down together so they can talk through what's going on and come to some sort of solution. And it also gives us an opportunity for the students to clear up any misunderstandings. Now, if we see that students aren't sticking to a solution, we can encourage them to create a social contract with each other. And as part of that, they even determine consequences that they will get if one of them is not adhering to that social contract. Next, we also have social skills development. We actually do a couple of counseling groups where we teach kids social skills. And if need be, we can do that on an individual basis as well. We also have counseling services. Ms. Brown, our school counselor, can work with students individually or in groups. And when necessary, we also have a mental health counselor on campus that we can refer students to if this situation warrants that. And of course, lastly, is consequences. Any type of situation where we see that a student is causing harm to others, then consequences do come into play. They do change depending on the situation. An important note to remember is that we can never tell a parent about the consequences that another student received. Now, some of our consequences may be working with our behavior interventionist, in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, and we have a few other consequences at our disposal. But in every situation, our goal is to help each student grow so that they can make better decisions in the future, as well as build up their skill set and learn how to handle situations more appropriately next time. So, lastly, let's talk about what you can do. First off, it's extremely important to have your student report every single time. And I do mean every single time. I can't tell you how many times a parent will email at the end of the year and say that they're upset that their kid's been bullied all year and that we haven't done anything about it. Well, guys, we would have loved to have supported your kid, but we have to know what's happening. And considering that repeated is one of the checklist items for bullying, we have to be able to document that a behavior is happening more than once. Additionally, if we try a solution and we don't hear any more reports from the student, we're going to assume that the solution worked. If it didn't work and the problem is continuing, we have to know that so we can try something else. Next is encouraging self-advocacy. Now, I have to be honest, families, and I know this may be something that's difficult to hear, but if your student comes home and tells you about something someone said or did to them, and you immediately jump to the conclusion that your student is a victim of bullying, you are sending your kid the message that they are powerless to do anything. I know that's tough to hear, but we don't want to raise kids with a victim mentality. We want to raise our kids to be strong, capable, and confident because while the middle school years are tough, they're not the only times in their lives when our kids are going to come across a difficult or even a mean person. As I said, our goal is to help our students make better decisions and to develop the skills they need to be successful. A large part of that is helping students believe in their ability to solve problems and overcome challenges. Encouraging self-advocacy may include teaching them to reach out to an adult for support, or setting boundaries about how they want to be treated, or learning how to respond appropriately in challenging situations. Lastly, modeling positive relationships. Kids do take the cues from the adults in their life. They watch how you treat other people and how you allow other people to treat you. So, modeling positive relationships in your own life is one of the best ways you can help your student build their relationship skills. In closing, our goal is to make sure each and every student has the skills they need in order to be successful in the future. And we truly appreciate all of you who partner with us in this endeavor. We love your kids, and we're so excited to have them here. Thank you.